Welcome back to Inside Property, the podcast where we speak to professionals within the industry shaping the way our world looks today. Today I'm joined by Chloe Parmenter from Urbana. Chloe, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk through everything really about planning and development journey. Chloe, thanks for coming all the way from Sheffield, like to join us. I'd probably like to start with stripping it right back to how you first got into planning, how that journey kind of started, what you studied at university. Would you be right to talk us through that?
Yeah, so I think that really early memory was my mum inherited like a dilapidated farm from her granddad, who wasn't her real granddad, but we actually went into an option agreement with a developer. And I remember I was at school, so I didn't quite understand the process, but I remember the demolition guys coming in and taking the roofs off these old barns, and I was like, that's really cool, that's a cool job. But it took them 6 months to clear this whole farm. And I think that stuck in my brain. Then I went to uni and did geography, and I kind of faked my way through a scientific degree because it was a BSc, and I picked all the human modules, and I ended up just doing one on rivers, and that got me the science side of it. But I had a lecturer to thank, really. She's called Anna, and she was doing the strategic planning module in my second year. She took us all to Amsterdam, not for that, but to go and study some
For what, Chloe?
We went to study some neighbourhoods, and we went to this one called Wester Park, and it was we were challenged with mapping out a bit of a 15-minute city, really, and what that model looked like and what was close by and how did people live, and did the social and affordable housing look different to the market, and we were just kind of set off on our own to go and analyse things. And I came back and I was like, that was really cool, I'd love to do that for a job. And she actually pulled me a week later and said, I think you'd be really good as a planner. And then I was kind of sold, to be honest, and I kind of, in my third year, then started applying for jobs and got a grad scheme and did a master's, and that's where it started, really. So
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was cool.
I think it's great how, especially at school, I've got young children, obviously, we've grown up through school, university and the following. You really get inspirational people that are leaders or teachers, and it's great to hear that someone's been inspirational to you and you've kind of chosen that journey.
Yeah.
So finishing university, obviously you did rowing at university as well.
Yeah, I was a rower. It's because I'm 5'10". I think they just saw me and they were like,
you'll
be good.
I was the same. I think I was told, right, you're going to be a rugby player.
Yeah.
Through rowing, how did you fit the rowing schedule in with the university?
It was quite easy because rowing was 5, 6 a.m. starts. So the hangovers were the worst bit. It wasn't the, I've not got time to go to uni. But I do specifically remember on a Wednesday, because we'd row in the morning, we'd do a double session, and then I'd have 9 till 12 at uni. I remember falling asleep several times, just trying to listen to my Rivers lecture and just nodding off. But yeah, it was one of them. It was such a passion at the time, and it was so social as well.
Of course.
That it just became really important to me. So I just fitted uni in around it where I could. But yeah, the social side was the heavy bit. Wednesday nights.
Okay, so yeah, going from the hangovers, the training, working hard, repeat, rinse, go again, to then coming out of university with your graduation. What was the first steps then into, employment?
So I left with a job already lined up. I think I had a bit of a panic in third year that I couldn't leave unemployed. So I sorted all that out. So I took a job down in Essex. So that's where I learned a lot of kind of greenfield development, working with volume house builders. I had a really great director who properly took me under his wing and taught me a lot. And I think I learned quite quickly about the sector and about what I wanted to do within it. I also worked for a great house builder and we became really good friends. So yeah, it was a lot of really good relationships that helped me out early on in my career. And then COVID hit and I was living on my own in a flat, and I got a cat, so I was like, I can't do anything else. I need something to keep me stimulated. And I'd always been thinking about going back to Sheffield, and then the job at Urbana came up, and I got recruited as a senior planner. And then from there, I've gone from senior planner through to director and shareholder. So
incredible.
It's been a bit of a journey. Yeah.
Talk me through Adam then, your boss.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, the first interview and how that relationship has grown from infancy now to being, a director of the company?
Yeah, Adam is someone that really champions individuals and their ideas if they're done in the right way. So he's someone who will let you fail to make your own mistakes, and I think that's a great trait in a boss because it creates trust. But yeah, I think he probably saw something in me as someone who was quite hungry for growth and development, and also loved cities and working with people. So I think I came in, I was probably technically quite good for my, what I was recruited for, but I think he saw the ideas and the relationship building side of my brain as well that really helped groom myself within the business. So then, it was promotion, and then before I knew it, I was a director. But before that, I had a quick break and went to Australia to do some consulting there. So I've been at Urbana for 5 years, but with a year hiatus, kind of exploring what that looked like. But so been back for a couple of years now, and boots firmly on the ground. I'm staying.
So what was the reasoning behind almost, the career break or the change to go out to Australia? And how did you realise maybe that Australia wasn't for you, and that maybe your heart was pulling back, to the UK?
Yeah, so Australia came about because I went on a 2-week trip there for a holiday when I was still working at Urbana, and I was just walking around the city, and I feel things deeply, and like places particularly, I can walk around and think, oh God, that blows me away. And it was one of those places where I was like, oh no, I think I want to live here. And I thought, Urbana's not quite ready to be Australian as well as, trailblazing in the UK. So I did have a quick Google when I was there at jobs and what that would look like, and I was kind of reassured that the systems were relatively similar. They're not. I was lied to.
Okay.
But I came back from that and I had a chat with Adam, and I said, I need to do this. I need to go away and see what this is about and why my brain wants me to go there and explore it. And, I left, and it was like open-armed goodbye, no deal to come back or anything like that. But we stayed in touch, and my heart has always really been with Urbana, and I don't know what it is about the company that just makes me really gel with it, and I kind of live and breathe it. But so we stayed in touch with Adam. Australia was good, but it maybe wasn't what I was hoping. I didn't have friends there. I took a big corporate job out there, so I was really just working with annual leave and not seeing a lot of the country. And then sadly my granddad got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I remember the conversation, my nan telling me that had happened, and I just thought, I can't be 24 hours away on a plane, best case. So I spoke to Adam. He made me put a business case together. And then I came back. So
amazing.
Yeah, bought a house back in Sheffield now, and I'm settled. And yeah, but I think it was important that I went and did that, because I think I needed to do it, but I also needed to know that wasn't for me at the same time. I get a lot of people saying, why did you come back? And I think, well, I think it's probably quite a strong thing to do, to admit that the glossy Australian life wasn't for me. I didn't want that.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. Like, through my rugby career, I didn't stay, at the same club. I went to different clubs. I had actually opportunities to go, to play in Spain, Australia, and I think those opportunities and those different environments grow you as a person, and help you focus on the direction you want to go in. And it's great that you've come back, reunited with Adam, and doing these incredible things at Urbana. It would be great to know, since returning, so some projects you've been involved in, and what Urbana is, specialising in currently.
Yeah. So we've worked hard to sector ourselves out, I suppose, because that's one thing we weren't doing through our marketing. So we do city, stratland, futures, which is like advanced manufacturing, renewables, and public sector. And we've tried to make that really clear now through our marketing. But I've kind of carved out my own niche of city living, which is, I guess, something that I was really passionate about. And like I said, I love cities, and I really feel them when I'm in them, and especially when it's a good one. So a lot of my client base has just naturally become that. So I'm now doing a lot of, talking on panels and working with those types of people that I can, really sink my teeth into. They're often really tricky sites, or, you need a really big team, or you've got a PM and a QS, and it's not something I was perhaps doing before when I was looking at more greenfield stuff, even though I think that is happening more now. I do think the more complex sites are the ones that get me out of bed. They're really exciting.
No, very interesting. I remember actually, how we first met. It was actually me being on I won't name the prop tech site. There are lots of prop tech sites out there. I don't want to, start marketing for them. But I was on the site. I was looking at different sites within Sheffield. It was, an area that we wanted to focus on in terms of, we saw growth over the next kind of 10 years. I suppose we've sold a lot of schemes in Manchester to our investors, investment funds, clients, moved now to Leeds as that's grown, and we saw Sheffield as the next place that we thought could really regenerate. I was researching, schemes that were going through planning. It seemed like every other one, Urbana were the planning consultant on.
I actually had a call from a planning officer the other week, and I'd submitted a pre-app and she picked up the phone and she was like, does she want another one then, Chloe? And I was like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, I think it's a great thing that you have that relationship, with councils. And maybe talk us through, obviously Sheffield is very much home of Urbana. You've got the London branch, but how have you had such a big impact on the delivery of houses there? Yeah. How have you built those relationships, and why Sheffield? What do you enjoy working on, Sheffield schemes? So
Sheffield is HQ because Adam, the CEO, is born and bred Sheffield. So a lot of us that work there aren't actually from there. So myself, I'm from Northampton, Charles is from Lincoln, Christian's from Leeds. So I think the success in Sheffield was really built on it being everyone's home, even though we weren't from there, and just really championing the city because we all stayed from students. So then we just naturally built very strong relationships by talking so confidently about the city. Investors and developers would come to us, and then the council really got to know us, and then we became heavily involved in the property association. So it just snowballed really. So yeah, we sewed up the market really nicely. Obviously we're not on everything, but that wouldn't be right anyway. But one thing we have worked on the past 3 years really has been branching out and making sure people know we're everywhere else. So we're Manchester, Leeds. We've got an office in London. We're about to recruit a new director down there as well, which is going to be amazing. And we do a lot in the southeast. We're doing more in Northampton. We're looking more around sort of the eastern side of the UK generally. So yeah, our growth plan has been, okay, we've nailed Sheffield. Let's not just be viewed as that. We need people to know that we go further afield. Experts of everywhere instead of one. I think there's a big misconception with planning that you have to be in that city to be good at it, and I just don't think that's right. Our job as planners is to understand policy and to know how to talk to an officer so that we can advocate for the developer. So, if there's something that I don't know in the detail, I'll sit and learn it and then leave it to me to go and, have the right conversation. Of course. That's a very interesting, topic to move on to actually. I suppose when I look at an outfit like Urbana, the knowledge, the team you have there, compared to maybe a local council that isn't as, well funded, a lot of holiday time, hard to get hold of people in some councils. I won't name a particular council, but I suppose that relationship building that you have is great to be able to pick up the phone. They know you by first name. That can really benefit a developer, benefit the country in terms of like the housing targets trying to hit. Would you see the relationships between councils as a big part of, progressing sites and moving them forward? 100%. It's just getting through that wall. I mean, a really basic level of example of what we're trying to talk about is officers often withhold their phone numbers because what they don't want is members of the public spamming them about development, being NIMBYs and saying, I don't want this to come forward. Their phone would never stop ringing. So what we do is we create relationships with them so that we're trusted with that information so that we then can just pick up the phone to them. We work with officers where really technically, I guess if you're looking at by the book, you should be submitting pre-apps and before you can have any conversation. But we work with officers where it's a pick up the phone and, here's the postcode, I've got this site, come in for a quick chat. We're thinking of doing a pre-app. What do you think? What's your, finger in the air kind of guess as to what you might look at this and say? And yeah, it's just really important to have that off the record chat and start the advocacy from the start.
And I suppose that's very important for the developer, for you to have that off the record chat, to be able to, at CityRise, we have clients that buy sites in and we try and help organise the exit for. What we really like to do is work with, planning consultants, architects, before that site is purchased, to create not only an opportunity that works very well maybe for Sheffield or other places around the UK, but to make it viable. So to make sure there is enough money in that site to push the site forward to being built out and produced. Now, there's obviously a long process from planning from start to finish. There's the new introduction of government gateway. What currently is maybe challenges that you're facing in terms of a developer coming to you, a site not becoming viable, maybe for the time frame planning's taking, or for the additional information you need to require to councils? Where are you seeing the struggles and almost the bottlenecks right now?
Yeah, viability is a really good point, and it's something that we've carved out for ourselves as a bit of our niche, because I think, the planning consultancy I was at previously, for example, we didn't really get involved in those discussions. We weren't massively in the commercial thick of it, whereas at Urbana, we are on day one and we're trying to get, unless a client says, I just need a consent, our priority is making that consent buildable. And there might be NMAs and Section 73s later down the line that you can't avoid. But my job is, I'm not just going to please you, Mr. or Mrs. Officer. I need to get consent here for something that our client can build, and therefore that's why this conversation is becoming very important. So I'd say the bottlenecks are often, I don't want to badmouth anyone, but sometimes you get officers that are reluctant to have a conversation with you, for example, where you might want to deviate from a mix that they've got in their policy. They might be strict on how many one bed studios they can have within a development. And we've got a client saying, Chloe, that just doesn't work. I'm not going to be able to sell them or rent them out. There's often a bit of a reluctance from officers to have that type of conversation until you have submitted a formal viability assessment to show them why, which means that at pre-app, where a client doesn't want to fork out $4,000 to have that report written, it starts to become a little bit, we're saying this and you're saying that. We're waiting for the technical evidence for you to show us it. And it then just creates, a bit of an awkwardness as we're going to planning, and until we are able to give them that report and they can go away and get it assessed by their third party. So that is a bit of a bottleneck. And then post consent, obviously you've got the gateways and they're getting better, more stuff is getting through, but it's lining them up with conditions and making sure everything's done in the right order. We had one scheme where it was just about to go through the gateway and then the bird box on the side of the building got changed. And so I don't understand how that's a problem. And the man said to me, well, if you think about it, anything that's fixed to the building, if it's changed, I have to let, the gateway system understand that. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes complete sense. So really small, tricky items like that have been problems in delivery.
We've especially noticed it on the agency side, the exit, the selling. We've had one client in Leeds actually last year. They had planning for 88 units on the waterfront. Beautiful scheme with an extension with a few stories. Obviously getting above 18 metres, got to go through the gateway. Yeah. He's looked at the time frame needed for that additional work and actually stuck with a reduced number of probably more 50 units. Yeah. And it's a shame to see councils like Leeds that are behind on their units they are producing, their houses they are producing as a council, but to almost see an additional piece of work like the gateway, which is needed. Of course it's needed, but I see it slowing down progression, making schemes less viable, people looking to get beneath the 18 metre marks, they don't need to go through it. And it's a shame that we're looking to work together to produce more residential properties for people to live in, but there's almost a system in place there that is reducing. Yeah, especially when you're looking at city centre living, it's supposed to be dense and exciting, and this 18 metre limit is not only reducing the number of homes, but it's flattening design. So there's less opportunity to make a city feel, and I'm not saying low rise is not special, but
you go to Manchester and you look at Deansgate and you think, wow,
Yeah.
that is cool. Who doesn't think that's cool? The gateway system needs to change. It needs to be simpler. It needs to be cheaper, especially with other regs coming in and, net gain, which I won't get into. But there are all these other costs for developers. What's the reward? It's tricky.
So with the gateway, it might be worth, for anyone watching that doesn't, what it is, maybe just telling us the reasons it was brought in, and what that process, kind of looks like.
Yeah. So it was really off the back of the Grenfell disaster. And obviously they had to do something to prevent that happening again in the UK. So what it means is that, where you've got buildings over 18 metres, you have to go through the gateway process. And there are all kinds of things like you need a second stair core and maximum distances across the building and that kind of thing. And it's all about safe escape, really. Yeah. What that does mean, though, is that you have to go through other gateways post-planning to even think about delivering the building. So not only have you got your planning conditions, but you've also got the gateways within them or after them, and it's a separate process, so it doesn't actually speak to each other that well. It also means you need more consultants because you need, everything needs a fire strategy now and fire consultants on it. And then it's just added time. So you've got program that's been extended and, it's just not, it's not productive. We're trying to deliver homes here and we're already behind the 1.5 million target. And yeah, I don't think we can wait much longer for that process to get simpler, because of we're in a crisis and that's only going to worsen the longer we take to deliver.
That's very well explained. I think it's maybe as a timeline so viewers can understand the process. One that we've both kind of touched and worked on is Cotton Mill Phase 2. Yeah. Obviously Pete Revel now heavily involved in that, like Andrew the architect very well. That granted planning, I believe, last year, obviously with conditions, 2 blocks there of, I think, 30 in Block B and 88 in Block A. Now, obviously the larger block has to go through Gateway. We're a year down the line, still hasn't been built, still not programmed to be built, probably till the end of the year. That timeline to get a planning for 118 units in Sheffield, what was that timeline and how did that process look?
I'm actually not sure because it was Charles.
Don't worry, we can edit that bit out.
Sorry.
Don't worry at all.
I guess though the key point is, the longer we're taking to build things, we had clients last week saying, have you seen the price of steel? Yeah. Because of the political side of everything that's, whenever anything kicks off, that also then is implicated. So we're looking at protracted timescales, but what else is happening within those timescales that we have to account for? That's exponential at times.
No, I like that. I think moving on nicely from the gateway and how that is slowing down the process, to get on site. I'm noticing a lot of developers now going for the office-to-resi.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through the changes maybe that have happened over the last 12, 18 months with planning and why developers are choosing to convert existing office buildings?
Yeah, I think investment into that is quite attractive. So that's probably point number one. The risk is a lot lower. There were also changes to Class MA, which is the route through permitted development that you would convert an office to residential. So it removed, I think, the maximum floor area that an office building could be. So now that's quite limitless. Yeah. And also there were time restrictions on, when was this last used as an office and that kind of thing. They've also been removed. So it has created freedom, I would say, and the ability to create more units. However, within those, you also still have to be doing NDSS size units. It has to be assessed in terms of, like daylight, noise and highways. So there are still tests to pass. That is probably why it's so important to have the right team on. You need the right architects, you need the right planner, because you need them to know what they're looking at. So hopefully they're straightforward routes to get a prior approval, which is a lot shorter than a full application. The timescales for the same size building and the same amount of units through a planning application would be, probably twice as long. So it is a much quicker route, and these are existing buildings, it's more sustainable. So it's great. The only thing about them is sometimes they still look like offices, don't they? And it can be a little bit disappointing. So quite often people still have to do a full application to change the facade or the window fenestration, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it is a good route for boosting housing numbers for sure.
Of course, yeah. I think it's a chosen route by many developers to like you mentioned, shorten the time frame to actually get on site.
Yeah.
I think that the cons though that I see pricing schemes is, you said the appearance. That can really struggle on the valuation side on the back end. Out and not liking that office-to-resi, look.
Also, you have to think about where people want to live. You want to look at your home and think, oh, that's really nice, that's really cool. You want to feel connected to it, and
of course,
maybe that misses the mark sometimes.
Yeah. We've seen a scheme recently actually in Leeds that has just got full planning for around 100 units. And the idea is it's an office-to-resi conversion to do the same to 2 other blocks within a very large piece of land. And it's such a shame with how the planning system is that if it was smoother, quicker, faster, an application would have probably gone in to remove those offices and put in a much larger application of high rise and a mix of, lovely landscape space. And like you say, design something where people want to live. So hopefully in time, I don't know, the system can change. So we're not looking for quick fixes.
Yeah.
We can look for, bits that benefit society where people want to live and work. Can you see any changes, like things that you would put in place if you were in charge of that sector that could help the production of that?
I think it's just applying the balance that we currently have a lot better. And I think it's about, sometimes I feel that councils often forget that the consultant side team is just as qualified, if not more qualified, to come with a good design solution and a reasoning for development. And I think sometimes the blockades put in place feel just a bit inappropriate. We all want development in the cities. That's all that's the reason we work where we work. And honestly, I'd get rid of committee. That would probably be the first thing I do, because how can you go to a committee with a recommendation for approval from a qualified officer to be told by often older people in the room that they don't like it, and scrabble around to try and find a reason for refusal, and then waste public money going to appeal? That public money could be spent on building affordable homes. It is crazy. So yeah, committee would go, freedom would increase. I think you can look at certain areas in the cities and just think, well, that should just be resi or whatever someone wants to come along and do within reason that would benefit the city. Let's crack on and do it. I think done right now is better than perfect. When we're in a position where viability is better, costs are down, profit is up, then we can talk about perfect development. But right now, I think we all need to be compromising and just saying, that is great for now. That is exactly what we need right now.
Wow, that's powerful. And I love the thought process. I think then moving from, we've talked about, developments that are going through the gateway. We've talked about office-to-resi. Another big sector in the UK right now that's grown over the last 5 years is, BTR.
Yeah.
I think something you're heavily involved in.
Yep.
I think obviously the master planning on these scalable sizes. I think the exits there from an investment fund that want to purchase these mass units that probably has a little bit more time to take through planning.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through, the build to rent sector itself, how you work within it, and how it can create larger opportunities within regeneration areas in this?
Yeah. I think the great thing about it is now it's become so established. There's a lot of trust through investment. So it's become a very attractive way to build homes. It also means that developers can hold on to portfolios if they want to operate them themselves, create income that way. And often other developments, can feed further development going forward, so they can build up a nice portfolio. What I think is great about them is it gets, you look at house shares, informal house shares, for example, where you've got unregulated private landlords renting out a 4-bed house to a couple, for example, and they're not living in the nicest conditions. It's expensive. It's all right, but it's not amazing. That house could be freed up, done up to be a beautiful family home where someone can have kids and take them to school and that kind of thing. it enables people to move out of those conditions, maybe into a city centre where their job is, into a regulated and well looked after development where they have community, sense of place, all of those things, you know, in the building and right next door. You know, we're working on so many of them at the moment, and the sense of community they bring with them, and the way the developers want to produce them so that they are proud of them and put their name on them is great. And I don't always understand why the council are so negative about them when we're sat there trying to say, this client is not wanting to produce something shit because they've got to put their name on it and operate it. So let's have a sensible conversation about what they need in terms of mix. Do we need to be a little bit below, you know, national space standards? Are we fundamentally according with space standards? Are they good size units? Let's have a really sensible conversation. The tricky thing with them is that affordable housing offer. So we're seeing quite a lot of DMR being proposed, discounted market rent.
Yeah.
But often that's not accepted by an LPA as a form of affordable housing. So we're still having to go through viability. So there's a lot of kind of chinks in the chain that we need to work on to make that development a bit more seamless. But the fact there is more and more coming out of the ground, I think, is increasing confidence in the market overall.
That makes sense. I mean, I think a client I've noted over the years that you've worked with is probably like Capital and Centric. They seem very proactive on the BTR side.
Yeah.
The schemes that you're delivering and putting through planning look incredible.
Yeah. And they're so, you know, that's an example of a developer that is so proud of what they deliver, and it transforms the place. And we're sat in meetings, you know, and they're talking about how they're going to use social media to kind of market the city for that council. Some councils are so excited by it, and it's great.
A client that you've worked with closely, probably producing these BTR schemes, Capital and Centric. How do you find working with them as a client, and how are they getting these larger schemes, you know, through planning?
It's a really positive journey, and it's all about, you know, we're working on huge teams with these people, and therefore we're getting all of the feed-in that we need from a really early stage. We're going through pre-app, you know, we're having online, offline conversations with officers. We're creating relationships with everyone on the team. It's a pick up the phone type job. It's really good. I think the big thing is their branding is great. So, you know, they've got standards across all of their developments, which means that councils can have confidence in what they deliver. They've got case studies that people can go and see. They've got social media that's branding a place for a council, which is really helpful in just getting people wanting to go there. So I think their emphasis on community is probably the one that is making them fly.
Incredible. I think I used to work more in the BTR sector, now working more, you know, with SMEs to help them with smaller development exit.
Yeah.
What I've really noticed through my career after retiring from rugby, obviously a much longer career in rugby than property, but I think all the things we've talked about is teamwork, working with the right people, working the right strategy. When it comes to BTR, I see a lot of SME developers trying to get funding for that when they don't have the track record or experience.
It's true.
It's a very difficult industry to find a fund that back you. Obviously, Capital and Centric, like you say, brand, incredible product they're producing now. An investment fund will back that to the hilts all day long because they can see the end product. For a developer going into that sector without the track record, that's where they fit more into, you know, the early exits of trying to get exits through companies like, you know, CityRise. But what we like to do is almost turn a developer, an SME developer, I like to call them, they're almost in the championship.
Yeah, okay.
And try and help them promote themselves to that premiership, you know, arena of that BTR sector.
Yeah.
And if they can have track record along the way of projects that they can show to investment funds of what they've produced and the quality, our dream is to, you know, send them clapping and away onto the investment fund that they can produce more units, bigger scale sites that, yes, it's predominantly foreign investment coming into the UK, but if that's a route to gain more residential units of good quality, then that's the process we should be taking.
Yeah. We've spoken to SMEs as well who are also on that journey, and we've, you know, recommended create your brand standards so that you have got a brochure to show someone this is what we produce and this is what we stand by. And even things like, this is the size of the furniture that we use and it's all in there, and this is what someone that lives in our places can expect from us. It's about showing the confidence, isn't it, when they've not got all of that.
No, brilliant. Probably ending up at, a few quick fire questions. Best design city in the UK currently?
I love London, but I'm from the south. But London for me is such a special city. It's, you can go, it just feels like a collection of suburbs to me that have real exciting architecture about them. You can be in Central and you're looking up the whole time and feel like you're being eaten alive. And then you go out to Balham and, you're my sister's got a flat there above like a really independent cafe and a laundrette down below. And it's just, I love that you can jump on the tube, be on there for 5 minutes and jump off, and it's like you've transported to a completely different area. So London would be my top one.
And the best council to be working with currently, the most proactive council in terms of planning?
Rotherham.
Really?
Yeah, that's where I found it recently. Been very excited by what we're proposing.
Fantastic. And before we kind of wrap up, I definitely want to speak about like last year, your journey into British weightlifting. When I look at the two, like a female as a planning consultant, and then after work going to lift weights, chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through like that journey?
Yeah.
What got you into weightlifting?
Yeah. So I've always been a bit of a gym goer. Someone as a woman maybe struggled with body image and things like that growing up. So have been in and out of the gym. And then a few years ago, I got my first ever coach, and he was a strength and conditioning coach. And I actually vaguely knew him from uni through rowing because he was one of the coaches there. And he wrote me a program, and I was with him for 2 years. And we kind of progressed from just bodybuilding type stuff to being a little bit more athletic and dynamic and doing like jumping and plyometrics and things like that. And then he taught me how to do clean and jerk and snatch. And I was like, oh no, this is really cool. And I remember buying my first pair of lifting shoes, and I kind of kidded myself that it was just to make my squat better, but actually I was just desperate to learn this new sport. Progressed with him and was lifting some pretty heavy weights, and he said, okay, right, let's go to a competition. So I got my membership and I entered, and I actually won. I first ever won in my category, which was really cool, and I'd done 2 more since. I left that coach because it was just time to go and try something different. So I actually joined a specific Olympic lifting gym in Sheffield. But sadly, I've been in and out of injury. So had a bit of a back problem. Different physios telling me different things. It's all been a bit confusing, but I've had to hang up the shoes, and I'm just back onto bodybuilding now. So you can see me looking wham in a few months, and that's why.
What a journey. What a journey. And so would the real reason for learning a clean and jerk be for on a planning refusal, maybe throwing the case officer out of a window, or?
I couldn't possibly say.
Brilliant. Chloe, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everyone that's viewed another episode of Inside Property. Stay tuned for guests to come forward in the coming weeks. Thanks, Chloe.
Thank you.